All right, we're going to get started now. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. This is the first session of a four-part series. And this project has been in the works for over 2 years now. And it's a really proud moment for all of us and in completing this project. This is the CMO's Guide to Programmatic Transparency. And this guide is designed in such a way that if used properly with your team, we could save the industry $10 billion. So that is our goal. And going through this, we're going to go through four-part series. This is the beginning of the series. And this will take us through the basic first steps. Kind of a review of the problems that we had, the CMOs discussed, and how we approached addressing those problems. Today we have a great speaker who's going to be doing this webinar, Jose Diaz. And I am not going to spend much time talking because he has got a lot to cover. And it's such a privilege to have you here today, Jose. Thank you so much. He has been working behind the scenes on not only this event today, but also in the writing and execution of this guide. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Jose Diaz. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, everyone, for joining. It is my distinct pleasure of introducing our Programmatic Guide to Transparency, which was a collaborative effort across many different teams, many different verticals, different marketers, digital experts that came in to really come together and provide a guidebook that we truly believe will be helpful in helping you and your teams understand what are the levers and what are the things that we can do in order to drive programmatic transparency. First, I would like to give a special thanks to, first of all, the ANA for their leadership. In particular, Smriti Kumar, who led this project while she was at the ANA prior to departing. Jenny Neiswanger for putting all of the efforts together to bring this to the finish line. Joe Ippolito from Accenture, but previously IBM, and Richard Brandolino from IBM, who were critical in providing us with the initial insights and thought leadership and how we can think about setting up this framework. And of course, a very special thanks to Brad Morinchek and Rachel Mervis from Kimberly-Clark, who were critical contributors to the content and helped us to get this to the finish line. So why are we here? Why do we care so much about programmatic transparency? Well, the reason being is that it's estimated that on average, only about 40 cents of every dollar that we spend in programmatic media goes to the publisher. The balance of the other cost is 60 cents is really spent on services and technology and the data that powers programmatic buying. And while most, if not all of these costs are critical to enabling programmatic buying, the issue that we have at hand is that we don't really have too much transparency into what each of those cost drivers are, which ones are critical, which ones are nice to have, and which ones, quite honestly, could be duplicative. And in some cases, the cost drivers may not be technologies or platforms at all, but rather different factors that go into bidding strategies or where you're getting the supply of your ads from. And so what we aim to do with this guidebook, the reason why we created it is we want to give you a guide that will help you and the practitioners under your teams to have the right tools, the right questions to ask in order to dig a level deeper, to really understand what are the necessary costs, what are the costs that can be optimized, and what are things that potentially are not needed or can be redundant. So as Jenny mentioned, our goal is quite aggressive. We do want to help recover 10 cents on every dollar. And we think that just by doing that, we can have $10 billion of savings that really we would like to see reinvested back into media, because this can really help drive more effectiveness, and it can make your media just work that much harder. Just imagine if your CPM that you're truly spending on media can go up from $4 to $5. That might seem like a little bit, but it's actually, in this world, it could have quite a significant impact. And we believe that that's achievable through the participation of 500 CMOs. So it's important to understand, as we think about the guidebook, it's important to take a step back and understand the context and just the order of magnitude of how much spend programmatic media actually represents. Since the first digital ad was sold in 1994, the digital industry has grown to an over 600 billion industry worldwide. And predominantly today, programmatic is the approach that's used to purchase those ads. It's estimated that 90% of digital ads will be purchased programmatically this year. In the US, that is estimated to be over $100 billion alone, and we expect that it's going to continue to grow. And most of this growth is expected to come from new entrants, relatively new entrants into the programmatic approach, such as connected TV, streaming audios. There are new channels that are coming into the fray that are really driving that growth because the demand is there. So as we think about why programmatic is so important today, we feel like it's important to take a step back and look at the history of what it used to be like 12 to 13 years ago. Programmatic really does bring a level of control that didn't exist back then. Back then, digital buying could really be categorized into two separate categories. The first being reservation buying, which is time consuming, because what this would entail is going directly to a publisher and going through potentially several weeks of back and forth negotiations. This is more akin to how we think about buying traditional media today. But in addition to that, targeting capabilities were much more limited. They were limited based on the publisher's capabilities. In most cases, you could target contextually based on content, or geographically, and in some cases you could put some additional layers of just high-level demographics. But what happens with this, of course, is that you're buying the placement and not the prospect. And that could lead to some waste that is not what we today relate to when it comes to digital buying. The other way that ads were bought was through ad networks. And while ad networks actually provided the scalability to be able to deliver mass impressions, the issue was that there was a lack in control. Many of these ad networks would operate under a black box model in which advertisers didn't really have the visibility into what placements they were running in or the performance into each of those placements. Now, the reason why this is critically important outside of just being able to have control is because, as you can imagine, being able to control brand adjacencies and making sure that your brand is safe, like you would with any other media, became extremely difficult here. Because while most ad networks would be able to provide you with a list of example publishers that's in their network, for the most part, it would be incredibly difficult to get a list of all of the publishers that would be included in your buy or that actually ran your media. So then came programmatic buying, and the mass adoption of programmatic buying came in quick. And the reason for that is because it really not only provided the scalability that the ad networks brought, but also control and flexibility and a lot more data-driven decision-making. Through this process, advertisers could set a clear set of rules, business rules, that can then inform the decisions as to who do we actually want to target, who's their prospect, what do they look like, what are the attributes that we want to go after, and how much are we willing to pay for that impression. And that level of control became available through what we also, you may hear programmatic called as real-time bidding. And through real-time bidding technology, you could set all those business rules so that when an individual or prospect browsed the web and showed up in an environment where there was programmatic inventory available, it would set a multifaceted process in which advertisers could bid for that individual. And the winning bidder would then be able to serve the ad in front of that individual as they're browsing the web, regardless of where they are. And this could happen across multiple touch points and devices. And the other thing that programmatic really brought into the fold was the ability to have more visibility into the performance of the media and have a closed loop between the impressions that you delivered and what you got from it. And that information can not only feed the decision-making for the real-time bidding to make it smarter, but also it could be used to learn more about the performance of your campaign and therefore also inform your business rules. And during the same time period that programmatic saw massive growth, we also saw an explosion in the MarTech landscape. To give some perspective, in 2011, there were around 150 MarTech solutions. Today, that number has grown exponentially to be around 8,000. Now, not all of these solutions are specifically tied to programmatic, but certainly programmatic media enabled a lot of these new solutions to take fold because it was a growing industry that was lucrative. And there was a need for a lot of these technologies to help bring more control, to help bring more data-driven decisioning. And so that also created this explosion. Now, the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that while some of these technologies are great and are absolutely critical, they all take a cut of the pie. So as we think about that balance of the 60 cents, this is where we really need to have more clarity into what actually happens between winning the bid and the ad being served, because programmatic buying is a complex product and it's fueled by multiple interconnected technologies. By the time the bid is placed and the ad is served, it kicks off a process, a multifaceted process that touches many different components. And each of these, again, take a cut of that CPM. That's how we end up with the 40 cents on the dollar, really only going to the publisher. Some examples of these, just to give some context, are technologies that can help with quality control. Are the impressions being served in places that can actually be seen? Are they being served in environments that we are okay having brand adjacency with? Other examples are additions to the supply side and the demand side technology. Are we really being the smartest with our bids? There's algorithms that can help to really inform to make sure that we are being the most effective possible. Also, of course, data. As we start to develop more and more hyper-targeted audiences, that requires adding data layers to make sure that we are targeting our most desirable prospects. And creative customization and other these types of technologies really help to bring personalization to the next level. Again, the bulk of these technologies are really necessary in order to make programmatic effective and efficient. But the key is to find the difference between those that are absolutely critical and those that may be nice to have. And so to help marketers and CMOs really know how to prioritize and understand what those costs are, that is why we developed the Guide to Programmatic Transparency. And what we really cover in this guide is the review of the programmatic process, much more in detail than what I went through, because as I mentioned earlier, it is a very complex process that has many, many steps. And in this guide, you will find a much more in-depth review of all the different components that make programmatic buying, real-time bidding possible. It also deep dives into the different cost drivers. So a few of those examples that I provided are just kind of touching the surface or scraping the surface rather. In the guide, you will find a lot more in-depth coverage of what those cost drivers are, how they are critical to the programmatic journey, but also what are some of the things that we can do to make sure that the tools that you're using are prioritized and they're absolutely necessary. And so with that, we're also providing the basic steps that you should take and the questions to ask as you're looking at your programmatic value exchange, and then a framework so that we can really provide the steps that advertisers can take to drive transparency regardless of the size of the company. From small advertisers to large advertisers, we wanted to make sure that this guide was usable by all, regardless of what level of sophistication you're in. And the way that we did this is we really assembled a group of formidable experts across many different verticals and different industries to come together to knowledge share and understand what is the challenge that we each face, because each may be different, and how are we solving it, and cross-pollinate that learning so that we can come together with a guidebook that is really useful across the industry, and as I mentioned before, across advertisers of all sizes. And in addition to that, we also partnered with some key media agencies that really helped us take it to the next level, so that we can make sure that we're also getting insight from the hands-on keyboard experts that could really help us understand not only the process at a surface level as advertisers, but also on a day-to-day basis. And as we're working with all these technologies, what are the key things that we need to be thinking about? What are the questions that we should be asking? So our journey began nearly 2 years ago, and it really kicked off with some knowledge sharing, and kudos here to the IBM team, Joey Polito and Rich Brandolino, who were able to share some of the findings that they were able to uncover as they opened the hood on their programmatic engine. And they did find that, you know, they could prioritize spending, and by taking some critical steps to understand what are the technologies that we need and where are their redundancies, they were able to save and reinvest that into media to make it more effective. And that's really where we started as our starting point to develop our initial framework. And from there, you know, we joined many knowledge sharing sessions between the entire group so that we could all share similar situations. In some cases, some of us had done similar exercises, and in others, we had other team members that were not as had been as experts in this space. So, you know, we really wanted to make sure that coming together, we were sharing what each of us had found and really develop something that we believe is going to be useful by all. And then as we went into the knowledge sharing, of course, we had to bring it all together into final draft and development and design. And now we're into the launch of this guidebook that we do believe is going to provide you with the tools required to really understand this process. And as I mentioned earlier, we developed a framework that could be used by brands of all sizes. And that was extremely important to us because we wanted to make sure that this was actually useful and applicable. And so we developed a framework that really splits it up into 4 categories of crawl, walk, run, and fly. And we broke it out within those categories into different subcategories of topics and cost drivers that you should be thinking about, such as agency management. How are you thinking about your data targeting? How are you using data, first party and third party? How are you using your marketing technologies on the buy side, right? So that's the demand side platforms where you're entering your bids. How are you thinking about on the supply side? Is there supply side optimizations that are happening? What are the sources that you're getting your inventory from? And are you working with your partners, whether it's an external partner or internal partner, to make sure that you are using the most efficient form? And then, quality metric improvements. How do you think about using the tools that you have to improve those metrics, and eventually to really unlock the power of all of these tools and the data that you have, to make sure that not only are you driving transparency and you understand all the cost components, but also that each dollar that you're investing, more of it is going to working media and being more effective. So each of these sections provides the tools that to really empower your team to drive this. We are including within each section the questions that you should think about asking. What are those key questions? What are the standards that you should be thinking about enacting? What are some of the potential outputs that you will get from that? And then as a result, what are the considerations that you need to be thinking about internally? Are there changes that you need to be thinking about making from a partnership perspective or even internal structure? And then post-phase considerations. And all of this is really meant to be shared with whoever's spearheading this initiative within your company. Because it will get quite technical as we get into the next phases. But as we think about what are the basic steps that we should be taking towards transparency, we can basically pare it down to a few things that you should be thinking about. In the crawl phase, you really need to be thinking about understanding who you're working with and what you're paying for. Are you working with an agency to execute your programmatic buying? Are you paying for the technology yourself, or is that being built into the agency fees? In the walking phase, we really want to push on understanding the functions and the benefits of what you're paying for. So once you've uncovered what you're paying for, it's really about understanding how does everything work? How does everything come together? What are the benefits of all those different pieces coming together so that you can ensure that you're maximizing your investment? In the run phase, we really want to focus on leveraging the functions and the benefits of that which you're paying for. So, obviously, once you understand how all those components are coming together, it's really about providing the tools and the questions to ask to make sure that you're maximizing those tools, that you're maximizing the services that you're paying for, and so that you're pushing to ensure that every dollar that you're spending is being prioritized. You understand where it's going, and that you prioritize pushing as much as you can into working media to be as effective as possible. And then in the final stage, it's really about maximizing the performance of each of these technologies so that you can align with what your current but also future business needs are. So in this case, it's not just about ensuring that you can drive transparency and ensure that you can drive more money into your working media, but it's also just maximizing and squeezing as much as you can out of each of the components that all play a role into the programmatic process. So with that, there's much more to dig into here. This is just the very basic steps and a very kind of top level review and introduction into the guide. In the next few sections, we will be digging much deeper into the more tactical things that you can actually do. And so, really encourage you to join those sessions and also take a look at the guidebook, because the guidebook definitely has all of the tools and information that you need in order to make sure that you can drive as much transparency as possible. So then with that transparency, it's not just about understanding the cost drivers, but also how can you maximize that? How can you make sure that you're prioritizing your spend so that at the end of the day, your advertising dollars can be as effective and efficient as possible? So that concludes the session. Thank you. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them.